Hello, my name is Bridget and this is my story. My entire family works at the restaurant my great-great-grandfather started when he came to America. It's more than just a business to them, it's a legacy, a source of pride, and the glue that holds everyone together. So when I said I wanted to go to medical school, they saw it as betrayal. I wasn't just stepping away from the family legacy, I was rejecting it. They made it clear, if I left, I'd be doing it alone. And I did. No help, no support. Just me, pushing forward through student loans, late-night shifts, and exhaustion. But I made it. Before we go any further, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far this little story can travel. Let's make this space feel a little more connected, no matter how many miles are between us. I got into med school, then matched into residency. Somewhere in that blur of hospital corridors and sleepless nights, I met Tyrell Martin, strong, kind, steady. We fell in love in the quiet moments between chaos. He stood by me through it all. We were planning our wedding for shortly after I finished my residency. And so one day, with a mix of nerves and defiance, I walked back into the family restaurant. The maitre d' led me to a booth near the front of the restaurant, deliberately visible. I slid in with quiet composure, letting the warm air, the clatter of silverware, and the scent of garlic and grilled onions wrap around me like an old, worn coat. I hadn't been here in years. Minutes later, my parents appeared. They didn't smile. They didn't make eye contact. They slid into the booth across from me, stiff and stone-faced. My mother crossed her arms. "You've got some nerve coming back here." My father's jaw was tight. "What exactly do you want?" I stayed calm. "I wanted to tell you something important. I'm getting married." They blinked, surprised, but said nothing. "His name is Tyrell," I continued. "He's a good man. We're planning a formal garden wedding, 6 months from now." Still no reaction. "It's going to be significant," I added, keeping my voice light but deliberate. "The hospital board will be there. Some donors. City officials. A few media outlets were already interested." My mother's expression faltered. "The press will be asking about my family," I said casually. "What should I tell them? Would you prefer I make a brief statement? Something like, my parents couldn't attend due to the demands of running the family restaurant?" Or, I leaned forward just slightly. "Or would you like to attend? You'd be seated up front, of course. At the head table. And Dad, if you'd like, you can walk me down the aisle." They looked at each other, unsure. I slid a cream-colored envelope across the table. "The invitation is for you, and for my sister, and her husband as well." My father finally spoke. "When is it?" "July 15th, I said. "You'll have plenty of time." They exchanged a long glance, more calculation than emotion. "We'll think about it," my mother said. "Let us talk to your sister." I nodded. "Of course." Then I smiled, just slightly, not out of spite, but out of peace. How little did I know what was coming. The next day, I got a text from my mother. "Can you come for family dinner tomorrow? Just you, for now." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Yes. Returning home after all these years felt surreal. The air still smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary, like it always had. The floorboards creaked in the same spots. The hum of the kitchen, the clink of glasses, the muffled laughter, it was all the same. As if I'd never left. Dinner was already set when I arrived. My parents were in their usual seats. My sister, and her husband, were already halfway through their salads. They greeted me like I was a neighbor they'd seen yesterday. No ceremony. No apologies. No mention of the past. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Then my sister leaned back, fork dangling in her hand, and said with a smirk, "Tyrell Martin, huh? Is he black?" I met her eyes without flinching. Yes. Everything stopped. The clatter of silverware. The quiet chewing faded. All eyes turned to me. My father's voice cracked through the silence like a whip. "How dare you?" Before I could respond, my brother-in-law glanced up from his phone and said, "Wow, he's rich." Everyone turned to him in confusion. He held up his phone screen, some article, or maybe Tyrell's LinkedIn profile. I didn't ask. I took a breath and said quietly, "His family has been in medicine for generations." A beat passed. And just like that, as if nothing had happened, the moment dissolved. My mother stood up and headed to the kitchen. "Who wants tiramisu?" she called lightly, as if my father hadn't just yelled. As if nothing at all had been said. The conversation shifted. Plates were cleared. Dessert was served. And I sat there, calm, composed, knowing exactly who I was now, and exactly what kind of family I'd come back to. We finished dinner without another word about Tyrell. No more questions, no more raised voices, just quiet plates, light conversation, and the polite detachment of people pretending everything was fine. Before I left, it was agreed they would all attend the wedding. I promised to send a limousine for them on the day of, a small gesture, I thought. A way to make things easier. Maybe even a first sign of healing. But that wasn't the first sign of what was coming. 2 weeks later, my sister called me out of the blue. "Hey," she said, overly casual. "So, why don't you have a bridesmaid?" I blinked. "I just haven't decided on anyone yet." There was a pause, then her voice softened, just slightly. "Well, I'd love to do it. I mean, if you want. It might be nice, you know? Us, standing up there together." Something in her tone almost sounded sincere. For a moment, I remembered the sisterhood we had as kids, sleepovers, secrets, and scraped knees. I said yes, thinking maybe this was the start of finding our way back. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a message from my father. No subject line. No greeting. Just a neatly itemized list: tuxedo rentals, hair appointments, 2 makeup trials and wedding day booking, shoe fittings. All for my parents, my sister, and her husband, and at the bottom, a total, $5,738.48. No explanation. No request. Just an expectation. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened my banking app and paid it. I told myself it was the least I could do. That it was part of keeping the peace. That maybe this, the wedding, the invitation back into my life, was bigger than pride. I clicked send payment and shut the laptop. Over the next 10 years. It was hard to pinpoint exactly when it happened, when the lines between family, obligation, and survival began to blur. The demands had become part of the background noise of my life, constant, unrelenting. It started with the mortgage on mom and dad's house. Then it was car payments, not just my sister but her husband as well. Tuition for both of my nephews to attend the same private school as Jenna. A down payment for my sister's new house. Groceries, school supplies, last-minute emergencies that never seemed to end. Eventually, I realized I was also covering everyone's phone bills. At first, I told myself it was love. That love looked like support, like stepping in where others had stepped away. But over time, it began to feel like I had bought my way back into the family. Bought peace. Bought silence. Love started to feel like something I was financing. Not given freely but bought, in monthly installments. Even Jenna, just 9 years old, was beginning to sense the cracks. She was bright, observant, and far too aware. They knew better than to say it outright, at least not the way people used to. But it was always there. The microaggressions. The comments said with a smile, wrapped in pretend innocence. "Oh, we thought there'd be fried chicken," someone would laugh during a family dinner. Like it was a harmless joke. "Really? She can swim," my mother once said, eyebrows raised. "That's great, not many of, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. She must love to dance, my sister offered once, watching my daughter walk past. Or sing. I bet she has a beautiful voice. They said it like compliments. As if stereotypes could be sweet when sugar-coated. And my daughter, only 9, would glance at me, confused, unsure why the room felt colder suddenly. She was too young to name it, but not too young to feel it. They didn't call her names. They didn't exclude her from the table. But they never really saw her. Not as a full person. Not as someone beyond what they expected her to be. And it hurt. Quietly. Deeply. Then the unexpected happened. Tyrell was coming home, just a regular Tuesday, just a late shift. He sent a text like he always did, "Be there soon. Love you." A drunk driver ran a red light. He died on the spot. There are no words for that kind of loss. Not really. I shattered. Quietly. The kind of grief that doesn't even cry at first, it just blanks out the world. Food had no taste. Days had no shape. I moved through my own home like a ghost, everything blurry and fragile. But Jenna, she broke open. She screamed when I told her. A sound I'd never heard come from her before. Then she curled into a ball and didn't speak for nearly a day. She waited by the front window for hours. Just stared. As if maybe the police officer was wrong, maybe the door would still open. But my parents stepped up in a way I never expected. My father held Jenna through the funeral, arms wrapped tightly around her like she was the most fragile thing in the world. He didn't say much, but he was there. Steady. Silent. His big hands wiping her tears like it was second nature. My mother managed everything behind the scenes. At the funeral, they were the ones who stood beside me. My father held my hand when I couldn't keep it from shaking. My mother stroked my daughter's hair and whispered prayers in her ear. When I faltered walking toward the casket, it was my parents, the same ones who once cut me off, who caught me before I fell. The first month, they were amazing. My parents showed up for everything, not just the funeral, but the long days after. They brought groceries, stayed overnight when the nightmares hit, sat with Jenna during school calls when I couldn't speak without crying. For a while, it felt like we were finally a family in the way I had always wanted, not perfect, but present. I told myself maybe loss had changed them. Softened them. Maybe we were finally healing. But by the 3rd month, I started to feel them pulling away. It wasn't sudden. Just little things. Fewer calls. Shorter visits. I understood, they had the restaurant to run. Life moves on. It made sense. Then the questions started. One afternoon, over coffee at my kitchen table, my mother sighed and said, almost offhand, "Did Tyrell have life insurance?" I looked up, caught off guard. Yes. She nodded slowly, not looking at me. Well, that should help. With everything you're dealing with. Just how much will it be? I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. The question hung in the air, blunt, cold, too soon. I just stared at her for a second, the coffee in my hand suddenly forgotten. My mouth opened, then closed. "I'm not really sure," I mumbled, though I knew. I just couldn't bring myself to say it. She nodded again, like she was satisfied. Like she'd been waiting to ask. And I sat there, still trying to figure out when this conversation had turned from comfort to calculation. Then a few days later, my father brought it up again. The funeral was a lot, he said. The strain. Taking time away from the restaurant. Putting our lives on pause. That came at a cost. I'd given them access to a credit card for expenses. They hadn't spent a dime of their own. And the restaurant was closed for only 3 days, but the way he talked about it, you'd think it had been 3 months. We lost money not being there, he added. Your nephews fell behind in school, too. Missing that much was hard on them. It would be great if we could get them a tutor. I hesitated, then said, sure. Just use the credit card. He nodded like it was the natural thing to do. And then the commentary began. Not about bills, because they hadn't paid any, but about everything else. The emotional weight. The time lost. The sacrifices they claimed they'd made. We had to close early several times that first month, my mother said. Staff were confused. Customers called. People talk. We were exhausted, my father added. You think it's easy to just drop everything and be strong for everyone else? They started framing their presence, their support, as something exceptional. Something difficult. Something I should be grateful for. No one said you owe us. But it hung there, in the space between their words. And just like that, grief began to feel conditional. They never said it outright. But the message was clear: look how much we did. Look how much we gave. Then the lawyer contacted me. Tyrell's will had been finalized and it was time to read the terms. I hadn't been expecting much, we never talked about money in detail, and grief had swallowed any thoughts of what came next. But the entire family showed up. They came dressed like it was a Sunday brunch, polite smiles, good posture, like they'd come to receive blessings, not news. My sister sat close to the front. My parents looked expectant. Calm. Comfortable. As if what was his had always, somehow, belonged to them too. The lawyer opened the folder and began. Tyrell had named my sister and both nephews. My sister had been gifted the beachfront cabin she had always loved, the one she called heaven on earth every time we visited. Valued at $1.5 million. Each of her sons was granted a fully funded trust fund. All of their education, from private high school to grad school, paid for in full. And then, regardless of how much was spent on tuition, each boy would receive the remainder of their trust, what was left of the $5 million. On their 30th birthday the trustee was the law firm. There were a few additional bequests to Tyrell's side of the family, cousins, a godmother, an old mentor. Everything else, everything not specifically given away, was left to our daughter. Held in a trust with me as the trustee, to be released when she turned 21. Nothing was left to me. My parents were furious. How could he leave us out? My father snapped before the lawyer had even closed the file. After all we did? My mother leaned back in her chair, shaking her head like she'd been robbed. We stepped up. We took care of her. We helped. My sister scoffed and crossed her arms. That cabin's going to destroy me with taxes, she muttered. And why should the boys have to wait until they're 30? That's ridiculous. The lawyer pointed out the medical clause. They could access the trust early in the event of serious illness or surgical need, but she waved it off. That's not the point, she said. It's just, who does that? And just like that, the mood shifted. The room went cold. The sympathy vanished. The family who had stood beside me during the worst days of my life now looked at me like I was a barrier, the one thing between them and what they thought they were owed. All the casseroles. The late-night calls. It all reappeared in their eyes, not as love, but as investment. And they were ready to collect. About a month later, my mother brought it up, casually, like she was offering a helpful suggestion. You know, she said, adjusting the sugar in her tea, your father and our health just isn't what it used to be. It might be time to sell the house and move in here. This place is big, and it's so empty now. I looked up, stunned. I blinked at her, trying to process what she was saying. Wait, what's going on with your health? I asked. Do you need care? I could hire a nurse, she waved her hand. Oh no, nothing like that. Just, slowing down. It'd be easier, that's all. I set my mug down gently and met her eyes. I've actually listed the house, I said quietly. It's just, it feels too much like Tyrell. Everywhere I look, I see him. I can't breathe in here some days. She went quiet. I don't know if it was disappointment or surprise, but for once, she didn't have a response ready. I didn't offer details about the apartment. For now, the silence was enough. The call came in just after dinner. My father's name flashed across the screen. And something in my gut already knew this wouldn't be calm. My father's voice was sharp the moment I picked up. No greeting, just anger. How could you sell the house? He barked. You didn't even talk to us about it. I held the phone a little tighter. Dad, it's my house. That's not the point, he snapped. You should have discussed it with your family. What's your plan now, huh? Don't tell me you're planning to move in with us. I took a breath. No, I'm not. I bought a 3-bedroom apartment. It's in a quiet neighborhood, close to Jenna's school and near a shopping district. It's a good space for us. Simple. Manageable. Silence. Then he hung up. No response. No goodbye. Just the dull click of the line going dead. The next call came in the morning. My sister. You really did it this time, she said, voice already boiling. You're betraying us all over again. You're just selfish, it's always about what you want. I sat quietly for a moment, then said, it's my house. Silence. She didn't like that answer. I knew she wouldn't. But it was the truth. Mom's crying, she snapped. Dad's beside himself. They were counting on you. But no, you just do what you want, as usual. Her words stung, but only for a second. Selfish, she'd said. And yet, I was still paying their bills. The thought came and went like a gust of wind, not bitter, just exhausted. Then her tone shifted, turning softer, more careful. Did you know the restaurant's in trouble? I blinked. No, it's not. She paused, just long enough to give herself away. She was trying to guilt me. There it was again. Not grief. Not concern. Obligation. Guilt wrapped up as love. It was then that I realized what they were really mourning. Was the version of me who never said no. It was a full month before I heard from them again. Someone in the family must have driven by and seen the moving truck in the driveway. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. So, you're really doing it, she said, skipping hello. And so quickly? I sighed. Yes, I'm still moving. No, not that quickly. I'm just putting some things in storage. She didn't miss a beat. Instead of paying for storage, you should sell that stuff and give us the money. I mean, really, what do you need it for? I closed my eyes, keeping my voice steady. I'm not paying for storage. It's at Tyrell's parents' place. Those things have been in his family for generations. They're meant to be passed down to Jenna someday. A pause. Then, more firmly, so no. I will not sell them. She went quiet, but the silence felt less like understanding and more like disapproval waiting to boil over. And for the first time, I didn't try to smooth it over. The next couple of months moved on quietly. We settled into our new home. Jenna loved setting up her new room, rearranging furniture, picking out fairy lights, taping photos of her and her father beside her bed. Slowly, she began to look and sound like the child she was before. Lighter. Brighter. Herself again. I turned the master bedroom into a guest room and office. I didn't need the space, and it felt good, choosing something that fit this new version of our lives. It was peaceful. We hadn't heard from my family since that last call, and honestly, that silence felt like a gift. The emergency payments had stopped. But the auto payments didn't, the car payment, the mortgage. Quiet, steady withdrawals. No check-ins. No thank you. Just silence. Then, 2 months before Jenna's 11th birthday, we were driving home from school when she leaned forward from the back seat. I was thinking, she said, for my birthday this year, I want to do something more grown-up. Like, a sit-down dinner. Real silverware and everything. I smiled, already nodding. I think that's a great idea. And after dinner, she continued, can me and my friends go to Sky Zone? I was just about to say yes when she added, I want to have the dinner at Grandma and Grandpa's restaurant. The whole family should be there. And my cousins can come to Skyzone after. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was beaming, already picturing it, a big family table, laughter, cake, noise. Maybe even healing. She didn't know what she was asking. Not really. But I did. When we got home, we started making plans right away. Jenna was buzzing with excitement. She wanted to have birthday breakfast with Tyrell's parents, pancakes, fresh fruit, and her grandpa's special hot chocolate with whipped cream mountains. Then, around 5, the dinner she'd dreamed of, the grown-up kind, with menus and candles and cloth napkins. She wanted 11 kids from school. 6 girls. 5 boys. She had it all organized in her notebook, complete with seating charts and doodles in the margins. And Grandma has to make the chocolate cake, she said, completely serious. Her chocolate cake is the best. She started working on handmade invitations, carefully cutting cardstock and picking out glitter pens. Her concentration was adorable, her brows furrowed, tongue slightly out, as she folded and pressed each card just right. I smiled, watching her. I didn't have the heart to interrupt her joy. But I knew. If we were going to have the dinner at the restaurant, if she wanted the whole family there, then I'd have to make a call. Not just to reserve the space, but to ask if they would come. The next morning, I made the call. I used a hospital extension line, not because I was at work, but because I was afraid they wouldn't answer if they saw my number. It was my mother who picked up. "Hello," she said sweetly, like she always did for unknown calls. But the moment she heard my voice, her tone turned cold. "Oh. What do you want?" I took a breath and began to explain Jenna's birthday plans, how she wanted to reserve the private room at the restaurant for a sit-down dinner. There would be 12 of us in total. I knew they couldn't turn down a party that size. Then I told her the part that mattered most. Jenna really wants everyone there. You and Dad. Her auntie. Her cousins. After dinner, the kids would head to Skyzone. But she asked for one thing. She wants your chocolate cake. There was a pause, long, waited. I could feel the tension crackling through the phone. She didn't know what to say. So she didn't. "I'll have to call you back," she said stiffly, and hung up. An hour later, my father called. "We'll be there," he said. For Jenna. I don't know if it was Jenna's plan all along, or just how things unfolded, but after her birthday, we started to return. It wasn't the same. It never could be. But we were invited to family dinners one Sunday a month. We were welcomed back, but it was a cold welcome. Polite. Careful. And of course, the emergencies followed. First, my sister needed her car fixed. Then Dad was short paying a vendor at the restaurant. Small asks dropped into conversation like afterthoughts. But I didn't mind. This is what love looked like, in my family, anyway. Not warmth. Not ease. But obligation, dressed up as tradition. And I played my part, quietly, because that's what we did. And then it started, the shift. Subtle at first, then sharper. Suddenly Jenna was a spoiled brat. That's what my sister called her, not to her face, but loud enough for her boys to hear. There were remarks tossed around like breadcrumbs. Born with a golden spoon. Trust fund brat. The resentment seeped in slowly, but it was everywhere. If her cousins saw Jenna with something nice, a new backpack, a tech gadget, even a pair of sneakers, they had to have one too. "It's not fair," they'd say. "She gets everything." And somehow, I'd end up buying it for them too. There was always a comment, something sharp and casual, like, "Well, not all of us can afford that kind of lifestyle," or "Must be nice to raise a kid who gets whatever she wants." They said it like a joke, but it always landed like a bill. So I paid. Again and again. Not because I had to, but because guilt is a hard thing to unlearn. And keeping the peace had always felt easier than standing my ground. But then it escalated. My family started saying I needed to discipline Jenna better, that she was too bold, too opinionated, too confident. She needs more structure, my mother said, as if self-assurance was a behavioral issue. She needs to learn her place, my father added one evening, voice low, like he knew exactly what he was saying, and what he wasn't saying. They never used the word white, but it hung in the air between their sentences. She doesn't act the way a girl like her is supposed to act. She wasn't quiet enough. Or apologetic enough. Or afraid enough. And I refused to teach her how to be small just to keep them comfortable. Dinners, once hosted in my parents' home, quietly shifted to the restaurant. Mom claimed it was just easier, no cleanup, no stress, and at the time, it seemed to make sense. I didn't question it. Not then. Then, one night, the waitress brought over the check. Only one. For mine and Jenna's meal. No explanation. No joke. Just the bill, laid neatly at the edge of the table. I didn't ask questions. I paid. And I told myself it was fine, that maybe it was better this way. That what mattered most was Jenna sitting beside me, still smiling, still safe. Because we didn't know what was to come. Then, one Sunday, it happened. We were having dinner at the restaurant. My sister's kids were all glued to their phones, barely looking up as the conversation swirled around them. No one said a word. No one seemed to mind. Then Jenna glanced at hers. In an instant, my mother stood up and punched her, a sharp, violent blow across the face that silenced the entire room. "Doesn't your little brat have any manners?" she snapped. "How dare she disrespect us during dinner?" My sister scoffed, barely hiding a smirk. "Such a brat." I stood, trembling. "Are you serious right now?" She looked at her phone, "Just like your kids." "And you hit her?" "You hit her?" My mother didn't even look at me. Instead, she turned coldly to my father, voice dripping with venom. "I told you letting them back in wasn't worth the extra income." The truth, plain and ugly. We weren't family to them. We were a business decision. I collected Jenna gently, her small hand trembling in mine. She wasn't screaming, wasn't wailing, but the soft, broken sobs escaping her lips were somehow worse. Quiet, choking sounds she was trying to hide. Her face was red, her eye swelling fast. She pressed a napkin to it, trying to hide. I didn't stop her. I just held her hand tighter. The whole restaurant was silent, watching us. Forks frozen mid-air. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. No one said a word. As we turned toward the hallway, weaving between the stairs, a man in a navy suit stood from his booth and stepped into my path. He didn't introduce himself, just slipped a card into my free hand and said, gently, "I saw everything. Please call me." I looked down. Mason and Broderick LLP. A name I knew. A name with weight. I slipped the card into my coat pocket and walked on. At the very end of the hall, just past the restrooms, was a small gray door with a sign, "Camera Room." I paused. Looked down at Jenna, her tear-streaked face, the napkin now damp, her eyes full of pain and confusion. And I walked straight in and I found the footage. Every minute of it. The table. The phones. The slap. Jenna's head jerking sideways. The stunned silence. My shaking voice. My mother's final, venomous words. I downloaded the entire dinner onto my phone. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. But I knew I needed it. Because this wasn't going away quietly. I didn't want to give my parents the satisfaction of watching us walk out. So I quietly slipped out through the kitchen. None of the staff had seen the punch, but they all turned the moment we stepped in. Eyes widened. A few gasped at Jenna's swollen face. Her eye was already swelling closed. I didn't stop. I didn't explain. Once we reached the car, I was shaking so badly I couldn't drive. Instead, I climbed into the back seat with Jenna and held her hand. She was quiet again, but the tears hadn't stopped. Her breathing came in short, uneven bursts. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos, her face, her eye. Then I called 911. Then I stepped out of the car and walked over to the parking booth, paid for overnight parking, and asked the attendant if they'd let the officers through when they arrived. He nodded, stunned silent. When the police arrived, they didn't question anything. One look at Jenna was enough. They drove us to the hospital. A nurse held her hand while the doctor ran the tests. She had a mild concussion. Nothing life-threatening, but still, a concussion. She'd have headaches, dizziness, and needed to be monitored. I held it together until they discharged her. At the station, I gave our statements, mine clear and calm, Jenna's quiet and scared. I want to press charges, I told the officer. Tonight. I'll also be speaking with my lawyer first thing in the morning. He nodded and took it down without hesitation. And then they drove us home. Once we got home, I settled Jenna on the couch and ordered takeout, all her favorites. Mac and cheese, chicken strips, garlic fries. Comfort food for a bruised little girl with a bandaged forehead and a heart too big for what she'd just been through. The doctor had given her pain meds, so I gave her a dose and made sure she had water and a blanket. Then I went upstairs, to the bathroom at the far end of the hall where she couldn't hear me, and I cried. Not the quiet kind. Not polite. The kind that empties you. I cried for her, for Tyrell, for the fact that this is what family had become. I cried because I hadn't protected her the way I was supposed to. And when I finally got control of myself, I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and went back downstairs. Jenna was watching a movie, giggling at something ridiculous on the screen. Her one good eye lit up when she saw me, and she patted the couch for me to join her. I sat beside her, brushing a hand over her hair. Then, quietly, I opened my laptop. I logged into my banking app. And I started canceling every auto payment. The car payments. The mortgage on my parents' house. Their cell phones. All of it. Gone. If we weren't worth the financial gain, then they could see exactly what that meant. I hit confirm on the last cancellation and closed the laptop. No announcements. No explanations. They'd figure it out when the bills came due. And they'd know exactly why. The next morning, I let Jenna sleep in. I got up early, moving slowly through the quiet apartment, trying not to think too far ahead. Just one step at a time. First, pancakes. She loved them the way Tyrell used to make them, fluffy, with vanilla in the batter and just a few chocolate chips sprinkled on top. I made them the same way now, because she still smiled when she saw them. Even last night, bruised and exhausted, she'd whispered, "Can we have pancakes in the morning?" So I made them. When the smell reached her room, she shuffled into the kitchen in her fuzzy socks and oversized hoodie. She looked small, but calmer. The swelling around her eye had spread, and the bruise was a deep purple now. But she smiled when she saw her plate. I sat with her while she ate, gently reminding her about her medicine and brushing a crumb off her cheek. After breakfast, I called her school. I kept my voice even as I explained that Jenna would be out for at least a week due to a medical issue. Could someone prepare some homework for her to do at home? There was a pause. Of course, the secretary said. We saw the video. It's just, she hesitated, her voice lowering, so upsetting. I blinked. The video? Oh, well, never mind. I'm sorry. I just meant, yes, we'll have her work ready. I just said, thank you. I'll let you know when she's ready to return. I arranged for a coworker, a good friend and fellow nurse, to come by and sit with Jenna while I was out. Jenna liked her. Trusted her. And I didn't want her to be alone. Then I called Mason and Broderick. I'm so glad you reached out, Mr. Mason said when he picked up. Please, come in as soon as you're able. We've already set aside time for you. The law firm's office was modern and calm, high ceilings, soft light, the quiet hum of professionalism. The receptionist greeted me with a kind smile and offered me coffee, tea, water. I declined, and she simply said, "Mr. Mason will be right with you." I glanced at the sleek surroundings and the polished floors, then the assistant called me back. I was led down a hallway lined with framed diplomas and media clippings. "Samuel Mason, ESQ." She knocked once and opened the door. Mr. Mason stood when I walked in. Mid-50s, silver gray hair, clear, steady eyes. He gave me a firm handshake and gestured to the seat across from his desk. "Thank you for coming," he said, offering a sad smile. As I sat down, I began to explain. "I downloaded the restaurant's camera footage," I said. "Right after it happened. I wasn't sure if it was even legal, but I oversaw the installation years ago, so I knew the password." Mr. Mason held up a hand gently, cutting me off. "Have you seen your nephew's TikTok?" I froze. "No, wait, what TikTok?" He leaned forward slightly. "We didn't get it taken down." I stared at him, not following. "Your nephew recorded the whole thing on his phone. He posted it online, titled it 'Grandma Set Spoiled Brat Straight.' It went viral almost instantly." I felt the blood drain from my face. "He took it down himself," Mr. Mason continued, "after the hate started pouring in. People were furious. The comments weren't on his side, not even close. Our paralegal screen recorded it before it disappeared. Would you like to see it?" He turned his tablet toward me, the video already playing. There it was. Jenna flinching. The sound of the punch, sharp, awful. They had even added a cartoonish punch sound effect, like it was something to laugh at. My mother's voice, cold and cruel. My sister's smirk. My father's silence. And me, standing in the middle of it all, trying to hold myself together. But what stood out most wasn't just the violence. It was the indifference. The casual cruelty. "The boys were laughing," I whispered. Mr. Mason reached for a printed packet on his desk. "Our paralegal recorded the video," he said, including the comments before it was taken down. He slid it toward me, page after page of usernames and raw, furious words. People weren't shy about calling it what it was. Lines like, "This happened because she's black. Just say it. Funny how you were on your phones too, but only she got hit. Y'all couldn't even pretend to care. This was about control and race." My throat tightened. "This is because she's black." Many people had said it. Out loud. In public. Hundreds of them. And they were right. Mr. Mason nodded grimly. "That's why people are angry. Not just because she hit your daughter, but because no one else reacted. No one comforted her. No one stopped it. The video shows a total lack of empathy." And suddenly it all made sense. The school secretary. The way she paused. The sound in her voice so everyone had seen it. Jenna. My baby. Online. Humiliated. Hurt. And betrayed by her own cousin. Mr. Mason gave me a moment. He didn't rush me. Just let the silence settle while I stared down at the printed comments, feeling the weight of them all. Then, gently, he asked, "The last thing your mother said in the video, can you tell me about that?" I nodded slowly. "She said to my father, 'I told you letting them back in wasn't worth the extra income.'" He leaned back slightly, hands folding on the desk. "What did she mean by that?" That's when I told him. About the payments. All of them. The mortgage on my parents' house. My sister's car, the phone bills. The vendor help. All the little emergencies. "I was still paying for everything," I said quietly. "Even after what they said. I stopped it all last night." He didn't look surprised. Just thoughtful. "That's important," he said. "Very important. I'd like you to work with our legal technology specialist. We'll help you build a detailed financial timeline." "Absolutely," I said. The next 2 weeks brought a lot. My mother was officially charged with assault against a minor. My father bailed her out the next day, without comment, without apology. My nephew was suspended from school pending a full investigation. They were reviewing it for potential permanent expulsion. I didn't celebrate that, but I didn't shield him from it either. Meanwhile, I worked closely with Mr. Mason and his legal team to build a full financial timeline. Transaction by transaction, we laid it all out: years of payments, debts I'd covered, bills I'd taken on without complaint. Every time I'd been guilty, every dollar I'd handed over to keep the peace. It wasn't just a paper trail. It was a map of financial abuse. With medical expenses, therapy estimates, emotional distress, and years of financial manipulation, we filed suit against my parents for $1 million. I never thought I'd sue my own family. But they'd stopped being my family long before the papers were filed. And slowly, the world responded. The family restaurant, once always booked, always buzzing, started to go quiet. Between the viral video and the guests who had witnessed the incident firsthand, people didn't want to be seen there. The reservation book stopped filling. The regulars stopped showing. Jenna started seeing a therapist twice a week, someone gentle but honest, who helped her name what had happened: an assault. She learned it wasn't her fault. She didn't talk about the punch at first, not to me, not to anyone. But her therapist met her where she was: no pressure, just presence. Over time, Jenna started drawing pictures, then asking small questions like, why do grown-ups get so mad? From there, the healing began. She learned words like trauma and boundaries. She slowly began to understand that what happened wasn't because of anything she did, it was something done to her. They also talked about the video, how to handle the stares and whispers, how to breathe through the moments that felt too big. She was still just 11, but every week she stood a little straighter. The next 6 months moved swiftly. As a first-time offender, my mother was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was something. Enough to be on record. And after nearly a century, our family restaurant shut its doors. They hadn't turned a profit in 3 months, and in the last 3 weeks, not a single customer walked through the door. My nephew was expelled. Both boys ended up transferring to public school. But Jenna was thriving. She was excelling in class, raising her hand again, laughing without flinching. And the word they used against her, sensitive, she took it and turned it into something strong. She joined the drama club, found her voice on stage, and learned how to own every emotion they once told her to bury. As for us, we won the lawsuit. We asked for $1 million. We were awarded $1.5. Thanks for listening. If you've ever been told you're too much, too sensitive, or too bold, I hope you remember this: you're not too much. You were just surrounded by people too small to hold you. If this story moved you, or made you think, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that speak the truth, no matter how hard it hits.